Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Welcome to a tale of old, woven into the very fabric of Middle-earth, where shadows dance between golden hills and legends drift through the wind like a whisper from the past. Tonight, we journey back to an age of dwarves and dragons, of ancient halls lost to time, and a wizard's guiding wisdom. Beyond the rolling green hills of the Shire, a different story stirs, one of adventure, of peril, and of courage. It begins with a wizard, draped in gray, his staff tapping softly against the earth as he makes his way to a certain quiet home, a home where an unlikely hero dwells, blissfully unaware of the journey that awaits him. Tonight, we uncover the tale of how Gandalf guided Thorin's company, shaping the quest that would lead to the very gates of Erebor. This is the story of how Gandalf sobered the legendary quest of Thorin Oakenshield and his company of dwarves. Long before the battle of the Five Armies, before Smaug's ruin was unmade, there were quiet meetings, secret decisions, and a wizard's foresight that turned the course of history. What truly led Gandalf to choose Bilbo Baggins? What unseen forces nudged the wizard to intervene in the fate of dwarves, elves, and men alike? And how did this seemingly simple journey set in motion the return of Sauron's dark influence? Tonight, as you settle into a place of rest, let this story wrap around you like the embrace of an old familiar cloak. The rhythm of Middle-earth's past will guide you into the world of dreams, where misty mountains rise and long-forgotten halls whisper their legends. Before we begin, if you find comfort in stories of Middle-earth, if you enjoy these journeys through lore and legend, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell icon. Your support keeps these tales alive, and there are many more yet to be told. Let the echoes of the past carry you into the realm of dreams. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let us step into the story together. A quiet meeting in a familiar place awaits, a place where the first threads of a great journey were woven. The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds above the rolling hills of the Shire. A soft mist curled along the grassy knolls, weaving its way past the rounded doors of hobbit holes, where warmth and laughter still lingered in the air from evening feasts. The scent of fresh-baked bread and honeyed ale drifted through the winding paths, while the occasional hoot of an owl echoed in the night. It was a land untouched by war, a land of peace and simple joys. But far beyond the comforts of this quiet home, forces were stirring. In the towering peaks of the Misty Mountains and the darkened halls of Mirkwood, whispers of old powers rekindling had begun to spread. And so, on this particular evening, in a dimly lit hobbit hole beneath a hill, a meeting was set to take place, one that would shape the fate of Middle-earth. Inside Bag End, the crackling of a small fire danced along the wooden walls. A modest but welcoming home, its shelves were filled with books on gardening and maps of lands beyond the Shire, though their owner had never truly considered using them. A tea kettle whistled softly, and a tray of biscuits sat untouched on the table. Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit of fine manners and steady routine, sat in his chair, unaware that his quiet evening was about to be disrupted by something far greater than he could have ever imagined. A sudden knock echoed through the hall. It was firm, purposeful, and entirely unexpected. Bilbo frowned, setting down his pipe. Visitors at this hour? How peculiar. As he made his way to the door, he hesitated for just a moment, and yet, before he could think better of it, his hand turned the handle and the door creaked open. There stood a tall figure, cloaked in gray, a long staff resting in his hand. His beard was silver, like moonlight, and his eyes, sharp and wise, seemed to see past the very walls of Bag End. "Good evening," Gandalf said, a small smile playing at the edge of his lips. "I am looking for someone to share in an adventure." Bilbo blinked. An adventure? I'm afraid you've got the wrong hobbit, sir. I'm not the adventurous sort." Gandalf's gaze twinkled. "Oh, I believe you are, Mr. Baggins. You just haven't realized it yet." And so, with a few more words and a chuckle from the wizard, the first steps toward a grand journey had been taken. But little did Bilbo know, this was only the beginning. Elsewhere, across the lands of Middle-earth, in the halls of the wandering dwarves, another conversation was unfolding, a conversation that would set the course for Thorin Oakenshield and his company. The following days passed in a blur for Bilbo Baggins. He had not expected visitors, let alone a gathering of dwarves in his own home. Yet here they were, cluttering his once peaceful dwelling, drinking his tea, eating his cakes, and speaking of grand quests and dragons. He had tried on multiple occasions to insist that he was no adventurer, that such things were best left to warriors and heroes, not hobbits of the Shire. But Gandalf, with his knowing smile, had other plans. As the company prepared to set off at dawn, Bilbo stood at his doorstep, gazing out at the rolling hills he had called home for all his life. The thought of leaving the Shire, of stepping beyond its gentle fields and into the unknown, filled him with an odd mixture of dread and longing. Could he truly do this? Was he, a simple hobbit, capable of facing whatever dangers lay ahead? The choice was made for him when he heard the faint sound of hooves disappearing into the distance. The company had left without him. "Wait!" he cried, grabbing his walking stick and a small pack of belongings. Without thinking, he dashed through the grass, his heart pounding. He had no idea why, but something inside him told him that if he let them go now, he would regret it forever. And so, Bilbo Baggins, against all odds, ran after an adventure. The road was long and winding. Their journey took them across open plains and dense forests, past rushing rivers and towering cliffs. The further they traveled, the more Bilbo began to realize just how vast the world outside the Shire truly was. He had heard stories of elves and men, of great battles and dark creatures, but to see these lands with his own eyes was an entirely different experience. At night, the company camped beneath the stars. They shared stories of their homes, their families, and the mountain they sought to reclaim. Thorin Oakenshield, their leader, spoke with a quiet determination, his deep voice carrying the weight of loss and hope alike. Erebor, their home, stolen by the dragon Smaug, was more than a place of gold and treasure. It was a symbol of their people's pride, a legacy that had been lost for far too long. Bilbo listened, his curiosity growing. He had never thought much of dwarves before, but he could see now the fire in their hearts, the unyielding resolve that kept them moving forward. And for the first time, he wondered if he truly had a part to play in their tale. It was not long before the dangers of their journey began to reveal themselves. One evening, as they traveled through a dense forest, the air grew unnaturally still. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches forming eerie shapes in the fading light. Bilbo shivered, feeling a presence in the shadows. "Something is watching us," he whispered to Gandalf. The wizard nodded, his staff glowing faintly. "We are not alone." Before Bilbo could ask what he meant, a sudden rustling erupted from the trees. Shadows moved, dark, shifting forms slipping between the trunks. Then, without warning, they attacked. Goblins. The company barely had time to draw their weapons before the creatures were upon them. Steel clashed against steel as the dwarves fought back, their battle cries echoing through the forest. Bilbo ducked behind a tree, his heart hammering in his chest. He had never been in a fight before. What was he supposed to do? Then he saw one of the goblins creeping toward Thorin, a cruel blade in its grasp. Without thinking, Bilbo grabbed a fallen branch and swung it as hard as he could. It struck the goblin across the head, sending it reeling. Thorin turned, his eyes widening in surprise. "Well done, Master Baggins," he called, before charging into the fray once more. Bilbo barely had time to catch his breath before he was grabbed from behind. A goblin had seized him, its jagged teeth bared in a wicked grin. He struggled, kicking wildly, but the creature was too strong. And then, a flash of light, a booming voice rang through the air, filled with power. "Enough!" Gandalf raised his staff, and in an instant, a blinding light erupted from its tip. The goblins shrieked, shielding their eyes as the magic surged through the clearing. The ground trembled, and before Bilbo knew what was happening, the creatures scattered into the darkness, fleeing as fast as their twisted legs could carry them. Silence fell. Bilbo lay panting on the ground, his heart pounding. Around him, the dwarves slowly got to their feet. Shaken, but unharmed, Gandalf stood at the center of it all, his expression unreadable. "That," Bilbo gasped, "was terrifying." Gandalf chuckled, offering him a hand. "And yet, you faced it." Bilbo hesitated before taking it, allowing the wizard to pull him up. His legs were still trembling, but something inside him had shifted. He had stood his ground, he had fought back, and against all odds, he had survived. As they gathered their things and continued on, Bilbo found himself glancing at the stars above, wondering what else this journey had in store for him. One thing was certain: he was not the same hobbit who had left the Shire, and he would never be again. The air had grown colder, the road harsher. The company of dwarves, Gandalf and Bilbo, had traveled far from the familiar fields of the Shire, through forests thick with whispers and mountains crowned with frost. Each step forward brought them closer to their destination, yet it also carried new dangers. Bilbo had begun to feel the weight of the journey pressing upon him. He had never walked so far, never slept beneath an open sky for so many nights. Yet something inside him had changed. The fear that had gripped him when he first left Bag End had softened, replaced by a growing curiosity, a quiet sense of belonging among these unlikely companions. One night, beneath a sky scattered with silver stars, Thorin Oakenshield called a halt. The group had reached a valley where the wind howled through the craggy rocks like the distant cry of wolves. Here, among the twisted roots of old trees, a forgotten ruin stood, half buried by time. The walls, once proud and tall, had crumbled, leaving only fragments of a once great stronghold. This was once a watchtower of the north, Gandalf said, his voice thoughtful as he ran his fingers along the cold stone. It has seen much, and it has forgotten more. Bilbo shivered. It feels eerie. Dwalin, ever wary, tightened his grip on his axe. If there's shelter, we should take it, but I don't like the feel of this place. The group settled among the ruins, lighting a small fire to keep the darkness at bay. Bilbo sat close, rubbing his hands together, watching the flickering light dance against the broken walls. Then something caught his eye, a glint of gold. At first, he thought it was a trick of the fire, but no, it was real. A faint shimmer buried beneath a pile of rubble. His heart quickened as he rose, stepping toward it carefully. With hesitant hands, he brushed away the dust and debris, revealing an object beneath the stones. A key. It was unlike any he had seen before, ancient, wrought from blackened steel, with delicate carvings of intertwining vines along its handle. A chill ran through Bilbo's fingers as he held it up to the firelight. Thorin's breath fought. That is no ordinary key. Gandalf's eyes narrowed. No, it is not. The company gathered around, peering at the object with wary fascination. The key seemed to hum with an unseen energy, its weight solid, its meaning unknown. Balin, the company's wisest scholar, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. That symbol, I have seen it before. He knelt beside Bilbo, tracing his finger along the markings with great care. This is a key to an ancient vault, Balin murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. A vault that should not have been opened. A hush fell over the group. Even the fire seemed to crackle more softly. Bilbo swallowed hard. A vault? What kind of vault? Balin hesitated. Legends speak of treasures hidden away long ago, before even the fall of Erebor, secrets meant to be forgotten. Some say that among them were artifacts of great power, items the wise wished never to be found. The weight of the key in Bilbo's hands suddenly felt heavier. Gandalf studied it closely, his sharp eyes gleaming. This key was meant for something important, and if we have found it now, it is no mere coincidence. Thorin, ever the leader, straightened his shoulders. If this key was meant for a vault of treasures, then it may hold something that can aid us in reclaiming Erebor. There was hope in his voice, but Gandalf's expression remained unreadable. Or, the wizard said slowly, it may be a warning. The words sent a shiver down Bilbo's spine. The fire crackled. The wind howled through the broken walls of the ruins. carrying whispers from a time long past. The group sat in silence, each lost in thought. Then Thorin made his decision. "We keep it," he said firmly. "Whatever lies beyond this key, it is now part of our journey." Bilbo wasn't sure whether to feel excited or afraid. As he slipped the key into his pocket, he felt a strange sense of purpose stir within him. The road ahead was unknown, filled with shadows and dangers yet unseen. But for the first time, he felt as though he had found his place in this adventure. A small hobbit, far from home, and yet exactly where he was meant to be. The journey beyond the ruins stretched across lands both strange and familiar. Each step brought them closer to the lonely mountain, yet dangers lurked along every bend in the road. For days, the company traveled beneath the vast expanse of Middle-earth skies, their path winding through forests of whispering trees, over rivers that shimmered under the moonlight, and across plains where the wind carried the scent of distant rain. Bilbo had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the journey, the quiet mornings when the world seemed to stir from slumber, the hush of the evenings when the fire crackled gently, and the weight of the mysterious key in his pocket pressing against his side as a constant reminder that their adventure was far from over. But Gandalf, ever watchful, had grown restless. "The world is changing," he murmured one night as he stood at the edge of the fire's glow, gazing toward the distant hills. "Shadows stir where they once lay silent. We are not the only ones moving through these lands." Balin, seated beside him, nodded gravely. I've felt it too. There is a weight in the air." Thorin, ever focused on his goal, tightened his grip on his sword. "If danger comes, we face it. Nothing will keep me from Erebor." Gandalf did not reply immediately. Instead, he turned his eyes toward the road ahead, his thoughts unreadable. Then, one evening, as the company made their way through a dense woodland where silver mist wove through the trees like drifting spirits, they stumbled upon something unexpected. A figure stood upon the path, clad in a cloak of deep green, its hood drawn low over their face. The air around them shimmered faintly, as though the very light of the forest bent to their presence. The company halted at once. Weapons were drawn. Then the figure lifted their head, revealing eyes as bright as starlight. An elf, Bilbo's breath caught. He had heard tales of elves, of their wisdom and mystery, but never had he stood before one. The elf regarded them with quiet amusement, as though they had been expected. "You tread upon the lands of the woodland realm," they said, their voice smooth as flowing water. "Few pass this way unnoticed." Gandalf stepped forward, offering a small bow. "We mean no harm. Our road is long, and we seek only safe passage." The elf studied them a moment longer, then nodded. "I know of your journey. The whispers of the trees speak of it." Thorin, ever cautious, furrowed his brow. "And what do they say?" The elf's gaze flickered toward Bilbo, lingering for a moment before they spoke. "They say your fates are entwined with something long forgotten. A key has been found, and doors that should remain closed may yet be opened." A hush fell over the company. Bilbo's hand instinctively reached for the key in his pocket. Gandalf's expression darkened. "And what would you have us do?" The elf's lips curled into a faint smile. That depends on whether you seek knowledge or folly. With that, they turned, motioning for the company to follow, and so they were led deeper into the forest, where the trees stood tall as towers, their golden leaves catching the fading light of the sun. The air smelled of earth and something ancient, something untouched by time. At last, they reached a glade where a great oak stood at the center, its roots twisting like the veins of the land itself. Here, the elf spoke again. "This tree remembers," they murmured, resting a hand against its bark. "It has seen the rise and fall of kingdoms, and it remembers the last time a key such as yours was held." Bilbo felt a shiver run through him. "And what does it remember?" The elf's eyes gleamed. "A choice." Stepping forward, they placed a slender hand against the wood, and as they did, the wind stirred, carrying with it a whisper, faint, distant, yet unmistakable, a voice from the past. The company listened in silence as the echoes of history unfolded, tales of a vault hidden beneath the mountain, sealed long ago by dwarven hands. A vault that held more than just treasure, one that held knowledge, secrets, and perhaps something more dangerous than all the gold in Erebor combined. The last who sought it did not return unchanged, the elf warned. To seek what is hidden is to walk a path not easily turned back from. Thorin set his jaw. "If this key can help us reclaim Erebor, then we must follow where it leads." Gandalf, however, remained quiet. Bilbo's heart pounded. He had come on this journey expecting adventure, but not this. Whispers of forgotten things, choices that held weight beyond his understanding. The elf turned to him. "And you, little one?" Bilbo hesitated. I don't know." The elf smiled, as though they had expected that answer. "Then perhaps, in time, you shall." With that, they stepped back, fading into the shadows of the forest. The company stood in silence, the weight of their discovery pressing upon them. Gandalf turned to Bilbo, his gaze sharp yet kind. "Whatever we seek, whatever we find, it is not only treasure that will shape the fate of this quest." Bilbo swallowed hard. He did not yet understand all that had been said, but one thing was certain. Their journey was no longer just about reclaiming a mountain. It was about something far greater, and whatever lay ahead, he would have to find the courage to face it. The air grew colder as the company pressed forward, their path winding ever closer to the lonely mountain. Though Erebor loomed in the distance, their journey had become more than just a mission to reclaim a homeland. It had become a search for something long buried beneath the weight of time and secrecy. Bilbo felt the weight of the key in his pocket, heavier than before. The memory of the elf's words echoed in his mind. A choice was made, and doors that should remain closed may yet be opened. That night, as they made camp beneath the jagged cliffs of a rocky valley, Gandalf sat apart from the others, his pipe unlit, his face shadowed by thought. Bilbo hesitated before approaching. "Gandalf?" he asked softly. The wizard looked up, offering a small but tired smile. "Yes, my dear Bilbo." Bilbo hesitated. What did the elf mean? About the key? Gandalf was silent for a long moment. Then, with a sigh, he motioned for Bilbo to sit. There are many things in this world, dear Bilbo, that are better left in the past. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Bilbo frowned, but Thorin thinks this key might help us reclaim Erebor. Gandalf nodded, and it might, but not all treasures are meant to be found. The wind stirred through the valley, whispering through the cracks in the stones. Bilbo shivered, though not from the cold. As dawn approached, the company prepared for the final leg of their journey. The mountain was near now, its shadow stretching across the valley like a silent guardian. But something was waiting for them. When at last they reached the hidden entrance to the mountain, Thorin turned to Bilbo. "This key you carry, it must have a purpose." Bilbo swallowed hard as he pulled the ancient key from his pocket, its edges worn, its surface cool to the touch. He turned to Gandalf, who met his gaze with a steady, unreadable look. "There is no turning back now," the wizard said softly. With a deep breath, Bilbo stepped forward, pressing the key into a small, barely visible lock within the stone. A deep, resonant click echoed through the chamber. Then, the stone shuddered, dust rained from the ceiling as the ancient mechanism ground to life, and slowly, a door that had been sealed for centuries began to open. Beyond the threshold, a vast cavern stretched into darkness, its walls lined with runes that pulsed with faint, golden light. And at its center stood something that none of them had expected. A vault. But not just any vault. It was a chamber unlike any in Erebor, untouched by time, untouched even by Smaug's greed. And inside, upon a pedestal carved from obsidian, rested a single, unassuming object. A small silver ring, not a ring of power, nor a ring forged by Sauron, but something far older, something different. Thorin took a slow step forward, his breath catching. "What is this?" Gandalf's expression darkened. "A relic of the past." Bilbo stared at it, his heart pounding. "What does it do?" Gandalf did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, brushing his fingers lightly over the surface of the pedestal. The runes along the walls flared brighter for a brief moment before fading once more. This was forged in an age long before Erebor, before even the great rings of power, he murmured. A ring of knowledge, of foresight, one that was meant to guide, not to rule. Thorin frowned. Then why was it locked away? Gandalf turned to him, because knowledge, too, can be a burden. Some things are meant to remain hidden. A silence fell over the company. Then slowly, Bilbo stepped forward. He reached out, his fingers barely brushing against the cool surface of the ring, and in that instant, a whisper filled his mind. Not words, not a voice, but a feeling, a vision of a world that had once been, of dwarves and elves standing side by side, of mountains untouched by war, of a time before greed and betrayal had severed the bonds of kinship. And then, a glimpse of what was to come. The lonely mountain, its halls filled once more, but shadows still lingered. There was a battle yet to be fought, a cost yet to be paid. Bilbo gasped, pulling his hand back. The vision faded, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the cavern. Thorin was watching him closely. "What did you see?" Bilbo hesitated, then shook his head. I, I don't know. Gandalf sighed. Then perhaps it is best we leave it be. Thorin looked torn, his fingers twitching as though he longed to seize the ring for himself. But in the end, he stepped back. Our quest is to reclaim Erebor, he said firmly, not to meddle in forgotten things. Gandalf nodded. Wise words. With great care, Bilbo placed the key back into his pocket. The vault would remain undisturbed. As they stepped out of the chamber, the stone door groaned shut behind them, sealing its secrets once more. And as they made their way back toward the mountain's peak, Bilbo couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just within the mountain, but within himself. Their journey was far from over, but some doors were meant to remain closed. The cold winds of the lonely mountain whispered through the valley as Bilbo and the company made their way back to camp. The night sky stretched above them, a vast canvas of shimmering stars, each one a tiny beacon of light against the dark expanse of Middle-earth. There was a quietness among them, a sense of weight in the air, as though they had uncovered something ancient, something beyond their understanding. Bilbo walked a few steps behind Gandalf, his mind still reeling from the vision in the vault. He hadn't spoken of what he'd seen, not even to Thorin. Perhaps he never would. Some things, he realized, were meant to be carried in silence. The fire crackled gently as they settled in for the night. The others, Thorin, Fili, Kili, and the rest, sat in small clusters, speaking in hushed voices, their minds occupied by thoughts of Erebor and the battle ahead. Bilbo, however, found himself drawn to Gandalf's side. The wizard sat slightly apart from the group, his gaze fixed on the glowing embers of the fire. For a long moment, Bilbo said nothing. Then, softly, he asked, Gandalf, do you believe we are doing the right thing? The wizard exhaled slowly, his breath curling into the cold night air. What is right and what is necessary do not always walk the same path, my dear Bilbo. Bilbo frowned. But if we succeed, if Thorin reclaims Erebor, do you think it will truly bring peace? Gandalf turned his gaze to him then, his eyes filled with something deep, something old. I do not know, he admitted, but hope is often the only light we have in the darkness. Bilbo thought about that. He thought about the vault, about the ring that had remained locked away. He thought about the vision, the glimpse of a future both bright and shadowed. Perhaps Gandalf was right. Perhaps hope was enough. The night deepened, the fire burning low. One by one, the company drifted into sleep, their dreams carrying them into the unknown. Bilbo lay beneath the stars, the key still in his pocket, a silent reminder of what they had uncovered. He traced its edges absent-mindedly, feeling the weight of its history, the choices it represented. He had once thought himself nothing more than a simple hobbit from the Shire. But the road had changed him. The world was far wider, far older than he had ever imagined, and he was a part of it now. A soft wind stirred through the valley, carrying the distant scent of pine and earth, the promise of a dawn yet to come. Bilbo closed his eyes, allowing the gentle hum of Middle-earth to lull him into sleep. Somewhere, far beyond the mountain, the Shire waited for him. And one day, when this journey was done, He would return, but not yet, for the road still stretched onward, and his story was far from over.